Looking at the 2026 Senate map, Michigan really is a crucial state that may be more competitive than other uh, modern swing states like Georgia and North Carolina. And while also maybe not as competitive as, say, Ohio, Texas, and Alaska, you can throw in Maine and Iowa. So that leaves Michigan in a very interesting position where originally seen as one of the strongest blue wall states, is now one of the more moderately democratic of the states that Democrats have to hold. In fact, I think it's going to be the closest state that Democrats have to hold behind Georgia, um, with the retirement of Gary Peters. Now, with the Republican lane being presumptively already chosen by Mike Rogers, who very narrowly lost to Alyssa Slotkin in 2024 against a now two-way race in the Democratic nomination. This is where things have been getting the attention. On one side, we have Abdul El Sayed, a former Wayne County health director and candidate for governor in 2018. We can look at how he did there, which was a distant second place against Gretchen Whitmer. And we can see that he has been endorsed by people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, as well as a lot of progressive grassroots organizations here. Working Families Party, Track APAC, so many. And Haley Stevens is sort of taking the lane, endorsed by Chuck Schumer, has gotten at least over $10 million that we've been able to track down from APAC. We really have a stark contrast between these two, and again, if this happened so many times in so many primaries, this Democratic, I wouldn't call it a civil war. I know a lot of people would pit the progressives against the centrists or whatnot, but what it really is a fight against corruption. Because you can be centrist, you can hold centrist values while still being grassroots. It just happens that being progressive has been associated with being grassroots because you are fighting against the corruption and therefore representing people and not corporations. So here on the integrity index, we can see Al Sayed has grade A, while Haley Stevens has grade F. This is meant to measure the integrity of their fundraising. And if we go on to him right here, we can see 99% of his donations come from individual donors, and 42% of those donations come from under $200 individual donors. Haley Stevens, on the other hand, has received only 72% from individuals, and over half of those individual contributions have been over $2,000, with a lot of money from corporate PACs. But it's not just the fundraising numbers, it's the outside spending. We can see here $25 million spent in support of Haley Stevens from Super PAC and $10 million spent against Abdul El Sayed. That is $35 million for Haley Stevens from super PACs. And if we go here against Haley Stevens, 400,000 for Syed. So that's about 3 million to 35 million. And that brings us to our primary election polling, where there is some disagreement. It's very close. In at least the Wikipedia aggregate of 270 win, DDHQ, race to the White House, real color politics, and 50+1, Al Sayed leads by 1.5 or 1.8 points, so 2-point lead, which is a 0-point lead in statistical terms. But what's interesting is that at least what centrists will say, and I'm not trying to pit anyone against each other, but what a lot of Democrats have made the argument for a lot of the time is that moderate candidates do better because they can reach across the aisle. If that were the case, then why does El Sayed lead by 1.7 and Haley Stevens lead by 1.1? Let's look at just 271. Haley Stevens plus 1.3, El Sayed plus 2.5. El Sayed has led the last 6 polls of likely voters, even from Republican aligned pollsters with both Qantas and TIPP Insights, giving him a 1-point lead among likely voters, while Haley Stevens continues to be in a very competitive nature with Mike Rogers. Oh, hi Jasper. Yeah, you want to make a political video? Okay. Now I'm not going to say that progressive populism is the thing that fixes all of Democrats' problems, and I'm also not going to say that the centrist trap of trying to moderate is completely not true, but it is worth noting that Haley Stevens, as a candidate, is not exactly the star that Democrats really wanted in this race. There were a lot of people that could have run in this race. Pete Buttigieg, Gretchen Whitmer, a lot of people that declined. And Haley Stevens was really nobody's first choice. In fact, I can prove that here if we go to the original polling. The very first poll, Haley Stevens got 4%. Very first hypothetical poll, 4% and then 2%. So she's kind of just the establishment lane at this point. And Syed is running up a grassroots campaign, the same kinds of campaigns that we've seen overperform and upset again and again and again in the Democratic Party, defeating not only primary opponents, but congressional incumbents. And they didn't really lead the polls when they won. And the fact that El Sayed is right now would make me pretty nervous to be Haley Stevens right now. 15 days out, the prediction market Kalshi does give El Sayed about a 2 and 3 chance of being the nominee and beating Haley Stevens. But keep in mind, he was up to a 90% chance against Haley Stevens. And while I think that's a little bullish and it has corrected itself, I'd probably give him about 2 and 3, 3 and 4 chance myself. It shows that people don't necessarily think that Haley Stevens is super strong in the primary or super strong in general. And I'm not supporting gambling. I'm not supporting scammy programs like prediction markets, but it is a gauge of what people think is going to happen. And we've seen in primaries before it has failed spectacularly, and it has done great in predicting. So take this with a grain of salt. Now, I wanted to talk just a little bit more about this kind of the moderation or centrist trap that I would call it, where people will say, oh, you have to moderate to get more voters on your side. And that would make sense if politics was a one dimensional political line. That is not the case. And if anyone, if even Donald Trump has taught us, it's that voters don't necessarily care where you are on the ideological spectrum. They care what you're going to do for them. And right now, Abdul Sayed is doing things for the people, and Haley Stevens is doing things for the Democratic establishment. That's not really my opinion. That's kind of what has been set out and what the situation is. But what the data shows is that Haley Stevens is not a great candidate. What the data shows is that Abdul Sayed is actually outraising Haley Stevens due to individual donations. And it's even more so when you consider the transfers and the corporate PAC. So how I think this race is going to go, I think El Sayed's going to win by more than the polls suggest. I could be wrong. Haley Stevens could defeat him, say he's too extreme for a swing state. That could happen. Things happen, things like that happen all the time. But in what is happening in our politics right now, I think Democrats are too angry to let an establishment congresswoman who has done the bidding of corporate entities take this seat, arguing for centrist moderation and win the primary. I don't think Democratic voters are going to let that happen. So we'll see what happens. I think either way, the nominee will beat Mike Rogers. I think Haley Stevens gives Mike Rogers a little more of a chance, but we will see come November.